My mother looked me in the eyes at my sister's wedding reception and said, loud enough for 3 tables to hear, that I had always been the difficult one. She said it like she was making a joke. People laughed. I stood there in the dress I had picked out at the venue I had paid for, holding a glass of champagne I had also paid for, and I did not say a single word. I had spent 4 years quietly building something that no one in that room even knew existed. And I had spent just as long letting my family treat me like I was less than I was. But there was an envelope in my bag that night. And when the right moment came, the room went completely silent. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something real. If you had paid for something important, sacrificed years of your life for people who never once said thank you, and then watched those same people laugh at you in public, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Would you walk out, or would you wait for the right moment and let the truth speak for itself? Think about that as Patricia's story unfolds, because her answer might surprise you. Patricia was 34 years old when her sister got married. That sentence sounds simple, but nothing about Patricia's life had been simple for a very long time. Her name was Patricia Hale. She had brown eyes, thick natural hair she kept pulled back most days, and a habit of staying very still when she was most upset. She did not cry easily. She did not raise her voice easily. She had learned both of those things the hard way, growing up in a house where emotions were treated like inconveniences and silence was expected from the one who caused the least trouble. Patricia was always the one who caused the least trouble. That was the story her family told. And for most of her life, Patricia had believed it too. She worked as a project coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company. She had been there for 9 years. She was good at her job. She was good at organizing things, tracking details, making sure nothing fell apart when it should not. Her manager once said she was the kind of person who could hold 10 things together at once without letting any of them drop. Patricia had smiled at that. She had not told him that she had been doing exactly that for her entire family since she was 17 years old. Her sister's name was Renata. Renata was 29 and she had always been the one the family orbited around. She was prettier in the way people noticed immediately. She was louder, more demanding, more comfortable taking space in a room. Patricia did not hate her sister for any of that. She had spent years trying to love Renata the way a person is supposed to love a sibling. But it is hard to love someone who has never once treated you like an equal. And Renata had spent most of their shared childhood treating Patricia like a background character in her own story. Their mother was named Gloria. Gloria Hale was 61 years old, sharp-tongued, proud, and skilled at making control look like love. She had opinions about everything and she shared them freely. She believed in appearances above almost anything else. She believed in what the family looked like from the outside. She believed in Renata in the particular way that some mothers believe in one child so completely that they never bother to truly see the other. Patricia had spent most of her life being the other. Their father, Dennis, had left when Patricia was 12 and Renata was 7. He had sent money inconsistently for a few years and then stopped. Gloria never forgave him, but she also never talked about him in a way that helped either girl process what it meant to grow up without a father. She just filled the space where his absence should have been with extra pressure on Patricia, who was the oldest, to step up. Patricia had stepped up. That was the beginning of everything. From the age of 17, Patricia had worked. She worked through her last year of high school while Gloria struggled to keep the lights on. She worked through 2 years of community college before money ran out and she had to stop. She worked through her early 20s in jobs that were fine but not what she had wanted. She sent money home regularly. She helped with Renata's school supplies. She helped with the gas bill. She helped with the car repair. She helped because she loved her family and because her mother had made her feel, without ever quite saying it directly, that helping was the price of belonging. Renata went to a 4-year university. Gloria took out loans for some of it and Patricia covered the rest by working extra hours and limiting her own spending in ways no one ever acknowledged. Renata graduated, got a job at a marketing firm, and moved into a nice apartment with a man named Derek, who eventually proposed with a ring that cost more than Patricia's monthly rent. Everyone was thrilled. Gloria cried. There were celebration dinners. There were group chats full of exclamation points. Patricia congratulated her sister and meant it. She was also very, very tired. The wedding planning started about 18 months before the wedding itself. Renata had a vision. It was not a small vision. She wanted a venue in the countryside about 2 hours outside the city. She wanted a catered dinner for 120 guests. She wanted a florist, a photographer, a videographer, a string quartet for the ceremony, and a DJ for the reception. She wanted custom invitations, a tiered cake, and a bridal party of 7. She wanted the kind of wedding that looked like it came out of a magazine. And Gloria, who had no savings and whose credit was not in a position to take on anything major, told Renata that they would figure it out. They figured it out by turning to Patricia. It did not happen all at once. That was how it always worked with this family. It happened in layers, the way water gets into a wall, slowly, quietly, and then one day you realize the damage is everywhere. It started with a phone call from Gloria about 3 weeks after the engagement. Gloria said she was so excited but so worried about how they would manage everything. She said Renata deserved a beautiful day. She asked Patricia, very gently, if Patricia might be able to help with a few of the initial deposits since she was so good with money and so responsible. Patricia said she would think about it. She thought about it for 4 days. During those 4 days, she looked at her own savings, which she had been building carefully and consistently for 6 years. She had just over $42,000. It was not a fortune, but it was real money and she had plans for it. She had been thinking about starting her own small business, a logistics consulting service. She had the experience, she had a few potential clients who had already expressed interest, and she had finally gotten to a place financially where she could begin to make it happen. She had a folder on her laptop with projections and notes. She had been building toward that folder for a long time. She called Gloria back and said she could help with the venue deposit. The deposit was $6,000. Gloria thanked her warmly and said she would never forget it. 2 weeks later, Gloria called again about the catering company, which required a down payment of $3,500. Patricia helped. Then came the florist deposit. Then came the photographer's booking fee. Then came a conversation where Gloria said the venue had a package deal if they could pay more of the balance up front, and it would save them money in the long run. And Patricia found herself writing another check. By the time the wedding was 6 months away, Patricia had contributed over $22,000. She had not told anyone the full amount. Each conversation with Gloria was framed as a specific need, a specific moment, a specific emergency or opportunity. Patricia had not sat down and added it all up until she opened her banking app one evening and saw what was left. She sat with that number for a long time. She did not cry. She went very still the way she always did when something was too much to process immediately. She called Gloria the next morning and asked for a conversation. She said she needed to talk about what had been spent and what the plan was going forward. Gloria sighed in a way that sounded like Patricia was being dramatic. She said the wedding was almost handled, that everything was coming together beautifully, and that Patricia should not worry because this was a happy time. Patricia said she was not worried, she just needed clarity. Gloria told her she would call her later. She did not call her later. Patricia sent a text that laid out calmly and clearly what she had spent and asked for a clear accounting of who was responsible for the remaining balance. Gloria did not respond for 2 days. When she finally responded, she said Patricia was always doing this, always making beautiful things feel transactional, always inserting herself into moments that should just be about joy. She said that Renata was getting married once and that this was not the time for Patricia to make it about money. She ended the message with a line that stayed with Patricia for weeks. I raised you to be generous. I hope you still are. Patricia put her phone down. She did not respond. She went to work, came home, made dinner, and sat with what she knew. She knew that she had been turned into the financier of a wedding she had not been truly included in. She knew that the word generous was being used as a weapon. She knew that if she pushed back, she would be labeled difficult, selfish, someone who could not celebrate her sister without making it about herself. She had seen this pattern her whole life. This was just the biggest version of it. She went to Renata directly about a week later. She asked if they could have lunch. Renata agreed. And they met at a cafe near Renata's office. Patricia told her sister plainly that she had contributed significantly to the wedding costs and that she wanted to understand what the full picture looked like going forward. Renata looked genuinely surprised, not in a grateful way, in the way of someone who had not known the details and was now mildly uncomfortable. She said she thought Gloria was handling all of that. She said she had assumed everyone was contributing a little bit. Patricia told her the actual number. Renata got quiet. Then Renata said something that cracked something open in Patricia's chest. She said, well, you can afford it. You've never had big expenses. You don't have kids. You don't have a husband. You rent a small place. It made sense for you to help more. She said it without cruelty. She said it like it was a reasonable assessment of resources. Patricia nodded. She finished her coffee. She said she appreciated the honesty. She paid for both of their lunches and drove home. That night, Patricia opened her laptop. She went to that folder with her business notes and projections. She sat and read through everything she had written over the past 2 years, all the planning, all the research, all the quiet, careful work she had done toward a future that was supposed to belong to her. Then she opened a new document and started writing something else. She wrote down every dollar she had given, every date, every purpose. She attached the bank transfer records she had saved. She printed it out, put it in an envelope, sealed it, and placed it in her desk drawer. She was not sure yet what she was going to do with it. She only knew she was not going to lose the record. The wedding was on a Saturday in late September. The venue was a converted farmhouse about 90 minutes from the city, surrounded by open fields that turned gold in the autumn light. It was genuinely beautiful. Patricia had to admit that. She had helped pay for something genuinely beautiful, even if no one would ever say so out loud. She drove herself. She had been asked to be a bridesmaid, which she had agreed to, but she had not been included in any of the planning meetings. She had not been asked for her opinion on flowers or colors or music. She had been asked for her contribution and then kept at a polite distance from the rest. She wore a dusty rose dress that Renata had chosen for the whole bridal party. It looked fine on her. She helped with the morning preparations because no one else was doing them efficiently. She fixed a bouquet that had been assembled incorrectly. She coordinated the timing between the photographer and the venue coordinator when a miscommunication nearly delayed the ceremony start. She did it quietly without being asked, because she was good at this and because she genuinely wanted the day to go well. The ceremony was lovely. Renata cried, Derek cried, Gloria cried. Patricia stood in the bridal line and held her bouquet and felt a complex mix of emotions she did not try to sort through right then. She was happy for her sister in the genuine way you can be happy for someone even when something between you is broken. She was also aware of a deep tiredness that went beyond that day. The reception was held in the main barn of the property, strung with warm lights and decorated with the flowers Patricia had helped pay for. The tables were set with linen and candles. The string quartet played softly as guests found their seats. Patricia was seated at a table near the front because she was in the bridal party, though she noticed that her seat was at the end of the table rather than near Renata and Derek. Small things like that she had learned to notice. The speeches began after dinner. Derek's best man gave a funny and warm speech. Renata's maid of honor, a woman named Cassandra who had been Renata's closest friend since college, gave a long and emotional speech about what Renata meant to her. Gloria was given the microphone next, and Gloria was not the kind of woman to waste a microphone. Gloria spoke beautifully about Renata. She spoke about Renata's strength and her light and her capacity for love. She spoke about watching Renata grow into such a remarkable woman. She talked about how proud she was. She held up her glass and said that Renata had always been the heart of their family. Then she made a joke. The joke was about how different the two sisters were. She said that Renata had always been the social one, the charming one, the one people remembered after meeting. And then she said in front of 120 people that Patricia had always been the practical one, the serious one, the one you called when something needed to get done, not when you wanted to have fun. She laughed when she said it. Several people laughed too. Then Gloria said something that landed harder. She said, Patricia has always been a little difficult to get close to, she keeps her walls up, but we love H. Anyway, another small laugh from the tables nearby, glasses clinked. The moment passed as quickly as it had come. Patricia did not move. She sat with a calm, smooth expression that she had practiced for years. She held her champagne glass with both hands. She did not look at anyone. She looked at the flickering candle in the center of the table and breathed slowly. 3 people at the table glanced at her quickly and then looked away. No one said anything to her. No one said that was not kind or that was unnecessary. The moment passed and the party continued. After dinner, while music filled the barn and people began to dance, Patricia stepped outside. The air was cool and the fields were dark and the sky was full of stars. She stood by the fence at the edge of the property and stayed very still for a long time. She thought about the $22,000. She thought about the folder on her laptop. She thought about the word generous being used to keep her giving. She thought about Renata saying you can afford it as if Patricia's quiet life had no weight, no desire, no cost. She thought about her mother making a room full of strangers laugh at the image of her being difficult to love. And then a car pulled into the parking area nearby and a man got out that Patricia recognized. His name was Warren Osai. He was a family friend older who had known Gloria and the girls since Patricia was a teenager. He had been a quiet presence at various family gatherings over the years. He was also, as it happened, the attorney who had handled Patricia's late grandfather's estate 7 years ago. Warren saw Patricia standing by the fence and walked over. He had not been inside yet, he was a little late. He asked how the evening was going. Patricia said it was lovely. He asked how she was doing. She said she was fine. He looked at her for a moment in the way that people who have known you for a long time sometimes look at you. Then he said quietly, I need to speak with you about something, not tonight, but soon, about your grandfather's estate. Patricia turned to look at him fully. He said there were some things that were handled incorrectly at the time. Your grandmother passed last year, which is what has brought it to my attention again. I've been trying to reach your mother. Patricia did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, she didn't mention it to me. Warren nodded like that was the answer he had expected. He handed her his card even though she already had his number somewhere and told her to call him the following week. Then he went inside to find Gloria and give his congratulations to the newlyweds. Patricia stood by the fence a little longer. Something had shifted. She did not know exactly what it was yet, but she knew it mattered. She went back inside. She danced with a few guests. She smiled at the right moments. She watched her mother hold court at the center of the room and Renata spin around on the dance floor with Derek. She watched her family perform joy and belonging and she stayed on the edges of it the way she always had, but something was different now. There was an envelope in her bag, the one she had packed because she had wondered if she might need it, and there was a name on a business card in her jacket pocket. And Patricia was very good at waiting. She called Warren Osai the following Tuesday. He asked if they could meet in person and she drove to his office that Thursday afternoon. His office was small and organized, full of books and folders and the particular kind of quiet that exists in places where serious things are discussed. He offered her tea and she accepted. Then he laid it out. Her grandfather, Herbert Hale, had died when Patricia was 27. He had left a modest estate. At the time of his death, the primary assets were a house in a small town about 2 hours away and a savings account. The estate had been settled and Patricia had been told by Gloria that there was very little left after debts and fees and that what remained had been split between Gloria and a small amount to each of the grandchildren. Patricia had received $800. She had accepted this without question because she trusted her mother. What Warren now explained was that the accounting had not been accurate. The house, which had been on the estate, had been sold 2 years after Herbert's death. Gloria had handled this. The proceeds from the sale, after all fees, had been just over $91,000. According to the terms of Herbert's will, which Warren had now located and reviewed again following the death of Patricia's grandmother, the estate was to be divided equally between Gloria and Herbert's two grandchildren. Not primarily to Gloria, with small amounts to the grandchildren, equally. Patricia had been entitled to approximately $30,000 from the sale of that house. She had received $800. Warren said he had been trying to understand what had happened. He said it appeared that the paperwork had been structured in a way that funneled the majority of the proceeds to Gloria before the distribution was made to the grandchildren. He said he was not in a position to tell Patricia what her mother's intentions had been, but he said the will's language had been clear and the distribution had not matched the will. He said Patricia had the right to pursue this. Patricia sat with her tea for a moment. She looked at the window. She thought about the $800 she had deposited into her account 7 years ago and told herself it was fine, that her grandfather would have wanted her to be gracious. She thought about the word gracious. She thought about the word generous. She thought about the way the people in her life used the language of virtue to keep her from asking questions. She asked Warren what pursuing this would involve. He explained the process clearly. She listened. She asked several specific questions. He answered all of them. Before she left his office, she thanked him and asked him to begin the process of formally reviewing the estate records. He said he would. On the drive home, Patricia did not feel the dramatic surge of energy that people describe in movies. She felt tired and clear. The two things could exist together, she had learned. She could be exhausted by everything that had happened and still see very precisely what she needed to do. She did not call her mother that evening. She did not send a message to Renata. She went home, made dinner, and sat at her kitchen table with the printed document from her desk drawer, the one with every dollar she had given for the wedding. She looked at the number at the bottom, then she thought about $30,000, then she thought about the folder on her laptop with her business plans. She got up, opened the laptop, and worked on those plans for 2 hours. She had not looked at them since before the wedding. It felt good to look at them again. 3 weeks passed. Gloria called twice during those weeks. The calls were cheerful and surface level. How was Patricia doing? Wasn't the wedding wonderful? Had she seen the photos the photographer had posted online? Patricia answered calmly and said yes to everything that deserved a yes and nothing else. She did not mention Warren. She did not mention the estate. Then Renata called. Renata and Derek had come back from their honeymoon and Renata wanted to have lunch. Patricia agreed. They met at the same cafe as before. Renata was tanned and happy and full of stories about the trip. Patricia listened. She was genuinely glad her sister had a wonderful honeymoon. At the end of the meal, Renata said something that changed the tone. She said, Mom mentioned that Warren Ose reached out to her about Grandpa's estate. She said it's nothing to worry about, just some old paperwork. She wanted me to pass that along in case he contacts you too. Patricia looked at her sister and said, he already has. Renata said, oh, and? Patricia said, and I asked him to move forward. Renata's expression shifted. She said, move forward with what exactly? Patricia said calmly, with reviewing how the estate was distributed. The numbers don't match the will. Renata sat back. She said, Patricia, Mom handled all of that. It was a hard time. I don't think she would have. Patricia said, I know you don't think so, but the documents say something different. A pause, then Renata said, are you serious about this? Patricia said yes. Renata said, this is going to hurt the family. Patricia said, the family was already hurt. I'm just finally looking at it. Renata called their mother from her car in the parking lot before she even drove away. Patricia could see her through the cafe window. She watched her sister talk with big gestures, watched her shake her head. Patricia paid the bill and walked to her own car and drove home. She was not angry. She was something beyond anger. She was decided. Gloria called that evening. The call came at 7:48. Patricia let it ring. Gloria called again at 8:12. Patricia answered. Gloria did not start with hello. She started with, what are you doing? Patricia said, I'm protecting what was mine. Gloria said, this is about the estate. Patricia, there was almost nothing left after your grandfather's debts. Warren doesn't know the full picture. Patricia said, he's looked at the will. The language is specific. Gloria said, I handled everything during a very hard time. I was grieving. There were costs. There were things you didn't know about. Patricia said, then help Warren understand those things. I've asked him to review it properly. If everything is explained, then we'll know. Gloria's tone changed. It went from defensive to something sharper. She said, you are doing this to punish me. You have never been satisfied with what you had. You have always found a way to make everything harder. Patricia said nothing for a moment. Then she said, Mom, I paid over $22,000 toward Renata's wedding. I helped pay for that venue, that food, those flowers. I was asked to be generous and I was, and then you stood in front of 120 people and told them I was difficult to love. A silence. Then Gloria said, that was a joke. People were laughing. You've always been too sensitive. Patricia said, I know what it was and I know what I'm doing now. Good night. She hung up. She did not pick up the phone again that night. She made chamomile tea, sat in her favorite chair by the window, and let the quiet settle around her. This was not a movie moment. There was no dramatic music. It was just a woman in her apartment who had finally stopped performing agreement. The next several weeks were difficult in the specific way that doing the right thing for yourself is often difficult. Gloria stopped calling Patricia directly and began sending messages through Renata. The messages were a rotation of guilt, appeal, and pressure. Gloria was upset. Gloria was hurt. Gloria could not believe Patricia was doing this over money. Gloria had sacrificed everything for her daughters. Gloria would not have survived after the divorce without Patricia's help, and was this how Patricia repaid that? Patricia read each message once and did not respond to most of them. She responded to two. The first was to Renata, in which she said she loved her sister and this was not about punishing their mother. It was about Patricia understanding what had been hers and what had been taken, and she hoped Renata could respect that even if she disagreed. The second was to Gloria directly, in which she said she was not seeking to harm anyone and that if Gloria wanted to provide documentation that clarified the estate accounting, she was welcome to give that to Warren. Gloria did not provide documentation. What Gloria did instead was call their Aunt Margaret, who was Herbert's sister and who still had some connection to family in the area where the house had been sold. Margaret called Patricia. The conversation was uncomfortable. Margaret said she loved Patricia and she did not want to get involved, but she had to say that what Patricia was doing was causing a lot of pain and that family should handle these things privately. Patricia thanked her for calling. She said the matter was already being handled through the proper channels, which was as private as it could be. Margaret said she hoped Patricia would reconsider. Patricia said she appreciated the concern. Through all of this, Patricia kept going to work. She kept doing her job. She called her two closest friends, a woman named Delia and a woman named Sujin, and she told them what was happening, not to vent, but because she needed people around her who understood the full picture. Delia said, "You are not being difficult. You were stolen from." Sujin said, $30,000 and $22,000. Patricia, that's your business. That's your future sitting in someone else's hands. Those conversations helped. So did the ongoing conversations with Warren, which were professional and clear and never made Patricia feel like she was doing something wrong. The formal review of the estate took about 6 weeks. Warren was thorough. He obtained the original will, the sale records from the house, the estate accounting that had been filed at the time of settlement, and the bank records that Gloria had been required to submit as executor. What emerged was not complicated once all the documents were together. The estate had been structured correctly on paper, but the actual distribution to the grandchildren had been made from a pre-reduced amount. Money had been moved before distribution. The records showed this. It was not hidden. It was just buried in paperwork that no one had looked at closely at the time because everyone was grieving and everyone trusted Gloria. Warren laid out the options. Patricia could pursue a formal legal claim for the underpayment. Given that the estate had been closed and several years had passed, there were limitations, but there was enough documentation that a formal demand letter was a reasonable first step. The amount she had been underpaid after all adjustments was approximately $28,000. The exact figure would depend on how the calculation was contested, but that was the baseline. Patricia told him to send the demand letter. Gloria received the demand letter on a Wednesday. Patricia knew this because Renata called her on Wednesday evening and said, "Mom got a letter, she's completely falling apart. Patricia, you have to stop this." Patricia said, "I don't, but I want you to know that I'm not doing this to destroy our family. I'm doing this because I deserved what Grandpa left me and I didn't get it." Renata said, "Money isn't worth this." Patricia said, $28,000. Lars was my business plan, Renata. It was my future. While I was sending money for your wedding flowers, the money I should have had years ago was already gone. So please understand that this is not small to me. Renata went quiet, a long quiet, then she said, "I didn't know about the estate, I want you to know that." Patricia said, "I believe you." Another pause, then Renata said, "How much did you actually give for the wedding, the total?" Patricia told her, $22,430, down to the exact number because Patricia always kept exact numbers. Renata made a sound that was very small and not easy to describe. Then she said she needed to think and she would call back. She did call back the next evening, and what she said surprised Patricia enough that she sat down before the call was finished. Renata said she had talked to Derek. She said Derek had looked at their own finances, what they had saved, what was realistic. She said they wanted to pay back $10,000 of what Patricia had given for the wedding, not all of it. They could not do all of it, but $10,000. Renata said she was ashamed that she had not known the extent of what Patricia had given, and she was more ashamed that she had said what she said at lunch about Patricia being able to afford it. She said she had been thoughtless and she was sorry. Patricia sat in the quiet of that apology for a moment. It was the most real thing her sister had said to her in years. She thanked her. She said she appreciated it more than she could easily put into words. She also said she still intended to pursue the estate matter with Gloria. Renata said she understood. Gloria's response to the demand letter came through her own attorney, a local woman named Mrs. Ferris who specialized in family and estate matters. The response did not deny the accounting discrepancy. What it argued was that the costs of administering the estate, along with informal debts that Herbert had allegedly owed Gloria at the time of his death, justified the distribution. There was minimal documentation for these alleged debts. Warren said this argument was weak and common in these situations. He said they should respond with a counterproposal. The back and forth between the attorneys took several more weeks. Patricia was kept informed throughout. She was not required to speak to Gloria directly, and she did not. She went to work. She had lunch with Delia. She spent a Sunday afternoon with Sujin's family and let herself laugh at ordinary things. She worked on her business plan most evenings. She had done the calculations. If the estate matter was resolved at anything close to the demanded amount, and if Renata and Derek followed through on the 10,000, and if she kept being careful with what she still had left in savings, she could launch the business in 14 months. She put that number on a sticky note on her refrigerator. One evening in early December, about 3.5 months after the wedding, Patricia's phone rang and it was Gloria. Not a message through Renata, a direct call. Patricia answered. Gloria's voice was different, not sharp, not manipulative, just tired. She said, "My attorney says we should settle." Patricia said she was listening. Gloria said she could not pay the full amount immediately, but she could work out a structured payment over 2 years. Patricia said she would discuss it with Warren. Gloria said, "I want you to know something." Patricia waited. Gloria said, "I told myself I needed it more, that I had sacrificed more, that you were younger and you would be fine." A pause. "I told myself a lot of things." Patricia said, "I know." Gloria said, "I'm sorry." Patricia sat with that word. It was not a large or dramatic apology. It was quiet and a little broken, and it was the most honest thing her mother had said to her in a very long time. Patricia said, "I hear you." She did not say it was okay because it was not entirely okay, but she also did not need it to not be okay forever. She was 34 years old and she was tired of carrying things that did not need to be carried forever. She said she would talk to Warren and they would find a structure that worked. The settlement was finalized in January. The payments would come over 22 months. Renata and Derek had already transferred the first 5,000 of their 10,000 commitment in December, with a note from Renata that said, "Only for your future, I mean that." Patricia had read that note 3 times. She had cried once briefly and then gone to make tea. She registered her business in February. She named it Hale Point Logistics Consulting. She used the deposit from Renata and Derek as part of her initial operating costs. She had 3 client conversations in her first week that she had been gently cultivating for months. One of them became a signed contract by the end of that month. The work was real and detailed and suited her exactly. She was good at it in the way that people are good at things they were built for. Gloria made her first payment in February as well. She sent it through the structure Warren had arranged. She also sent a small card. The card said, "I'm proud of you even when I don't show it. I'm learning to show it." Patricia put the card in the drawer of her desk, not the same drawer as the printed bank records, a different one, a smaller drawer, a quieter one. Spring came. Patricia's business grew slowly and then a little faster. She hired a part-time assistant by April, a young woman named Grace who was organized and eager and reminded Patricia a little of herself at 22, though Patricia made sure Grace knew her work was valued and said so regularly. She did not want Grace to spend years learning the cost of not being told. She did not want that for anyone she had influence over. Renata called on a Saturday in May to ask if Patricia wanted to come to dinner, just a casual dinner at Renata and Derek's apartment. Patricia said yes. She brought wine, they ate at the kitchen table, the 3 of them, and it was not perfectly comfortable. Some things between sisters take time and others take more than time, but it was honest. Renata asked about the business and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. Derek asked good questions. Patricia found herself talking more than she usually did in family settings. It felt different when people were actually listening. After dinner, while Derek was cleaning up, Renata and Patricia sat with their wine and Renata said, "I've been thinking about the wedding, about what Mom said, the difficult to love thing." Patricia said she remembered it. Renata said, "I should have said something in the room. In that moment, I didn't and I'm sorry." Patricia said, "What would you have said?" Renata thought about it for a moment. She said, "I would have said that you are the most capable person I know and that if I had to choose one person to have in my corner for the hardest moments of my life, it would be you." And I would have said that out loud in front of everyone. Patricia looked at her sister for a moment, then she said, "That's a good thing to say." Renata said, "I mean it." Patricia believed her. Gloria came to see Patricia's new office space in June. She had asked if she could visit and Patricia had said yes. The office was small, 1 room in a shared professional building with a glass desk and 2 good chairs and a whiteboard on one wall covered in project notes. Gloria walked around it slowly. She looked at everything. Then she sat in one of the chairs and looked at Patricia and said, "You did this." Patricia said, "I did." Gloria said, "You always could. I should have told you that more." Patricia poured 2 cups of coffee from the small machine on the corner table. She handed one to her mother. She sat down across from her. They talked for an hour about things that were not the estate, not the wedding, not the money. They talked about Herbert, Patricia's grandfather, and what he had been like when Gloria was young. They talked about what Gloria had been afraid of in the years after the divorce. They talked about the particular fear of raising children when you yourself do not feel like. It was not a perfect conversation, but it was a real one. Patricia drove home that evening with the windows down. The city was warm and loud and full of its usual energy. She thought about everything that had happened in the past 9 months. She thought about standing by that fence in the dark during the wedding, looking at the stars and feeling the weight of everything she had given and never had returned. She thought about Warren handing her his card. She thought about the folder on her laptop that she had almost given up on. She thought about the sticky note on her refrigerator that said 14 months, which had turned into less than 14 months because she had fought for what was hers. She did not think of herself as someone who had won something. That framing never felt right to her. She thought of herself as someone who had finally stopped losing something. There is a difference. Winning implies there is a prize at the end and you cross a finish line and everything is bright. What Patricia had done was different. She had simply, finally, stopped accepting the version of herself that other people found most convenient. She had stopped being the generous one, the practical one, the difficult to love one. She had started being the one who knew what she had built and would not let it disappear again. She thought about what her grandfather Herbert would have made of all of it. He had been a quiet man. She remembered him as steady, the kind of person whose presence made a room feel more solid. He had not given her much guidance in words, but she remembered the way he noticed things. He would notice when you had worked hard on something. He would say yes. Oh, she thought he would have been glad the money found its way to her. She thought he would have liked Hale Point Logistics Consulting. She thought he would have laughed a little at the name and then said it sounded serious and professional, which was what she had been going for. By late summer, the business had 3 consistent clients, and Patricia was in early conversations with a fourth. She was covering her own expenses and beginning to rebuild the savings that had been depleted through years of family contributions and the wedding costs. The estate payments from Gloria came on schedule. She did not feel warmth toward her mother every day. Some days she still felt the old weariness. But she was not running from anything anymore, and she was not carrying things that were not hers to carry. That was not a small thing. It was actually everything. She and Renata had dinner about once a month now. It was becoming something that felt like it might eventually become routine, which was more than Patricia had expected. She did not need Renata to be her closest person. She had Delia and Sujin for that, but having a sister who saw her, even a little more clearly now than before, was something she had not known she still wanted until she had it. In September, almost exactly a year after the wedding, Patricia went back to the venue, not for any event. She had been asked by a colleague at her professional networking group if she knew of any good event venues in the area because his company was planning an annual dinner. Patricia had thought of the farmhouse. She drove out on a weekday afternoon to speak with the venue manager about their corporate event capabilities. She walked through the barn, which was empty and calm and fully different from the night of the wedding. She talked business with the manager and took notes and said she would follow up. Before she left, she stood for a moment in the middle of the empty barn. The afternoon light came through the windows in long, warm lines. She could see the field through the glass at the far end, golden again the way it had been a year ago. She did not feel the weight of that night the way she had expected to. She felt something smaller and cleaner, like she had come back and found that a place that once made her feel small was just a place. She walked to her car and drove back to the city and went to her office and finished the rest of her workday. There are things Patricia would tell you if you asked her directly what she had learned. She would not phrase them as lessons because she does not like when people frame pain as a curriculum, but she would say a few things plainly. She would say that being the dependable one is not the same as being loved. She would say that the language of virtue, words like generous and gracious and family and sacrifice, can be used by people who care about you and also by people who are using you, and the difference is not always obvious until you stop to look. She would say that keeping records is not cold. It is honest. She would say that the things you build quietly, alone, without anyone watching, are usually the things most worth building. She would say that 34 is not too late to start. That 14 months was not too long to wait. That one real apology, even a small and imperfect one from someone who had hurt you, can matter without making everything okay. That sisters can grow into something better than what they were. That mothers can say I'm learning to show it and mean it, even if the timing is years overdue. She would say that the night she stood by that fence at the edge of the wedding property, looking at the dark field and the full sky, was not the worst night of her life. It was the night she finally understood what she had been doing to herself for a very long time. And that understanding, even when it hurts, is always the beginning of something better. Patricia still has the printed document in her desk, the one with every dollar and every date. She does not look at it often, but she has not thrown it away. She says it reminds her that clarity is always worth more than comfort, and that the moment you stop pretending the numbers do not exist is the moment the future becomes real again. If Patricia's story touched something in you, I want you to sit with this question for a moment. Has there been someone in your life, maybe even yourself, who kept giving and giving to people who never truly saw the cost? Someone who stayed quiet because speaking up felt too risky, too selfish, too disruptive? Patricia did not win by being the loudest person in the room. She won by finally valuing what she had built as much as the people she loved had always expected her to. Leave a comment below and tell me, was there a moment when you realized you had been giving too much to people who were not giving enough back? I would genuinely like to know.